How did you get introduced to Earth, Wind, and Fire?
How I got introduced to Earth, Wind, and Fire. So my
Yes.
father used to make mixtapes. If you guys know TDKs and Maxwell's and all that stuff, all those old tapes you can record music onto. So he made a mixtape of all his favorite Earth, Wind, and Fire songs. He basically would
Mm.
just take a block of songs and then like in the same sequence and put it on an album and then just do another block of songs and put it on it back to back to back to back. So I used to love listening to, Gratitude and listening to Head to the Sky, you know, Last Days and Times and all those songs. And then I gradually started to listen to the albums in full on my own outside of, being in the front seat of my dad's car and the back seat of my dad's car. This particular album, I'm I'm extremely like aware of the first time I heard it. I'm from Syracuse, New York. My grandparents, God rest their souls, they lived in Elmira, New York, which is like 90 minutes south. So every summer we would drive down, and my dad got that tape for I think his birthday or wedding anniversary or something. So he popped that tape in, and then I was just like, oh wow. Then they got to the second song, which I'll talk about in a minute, and I was just like, I almost started to convulse, like because it was so great. So that's how I got introduced to that album, Earth, Wind, and Fire. I think is the greatest American band in music history. They literally can do everything and do everything at a high level.
Agreed. 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 Um, how did I get introduced to Earth, Wind, and Fire? It's crazy because my Uncle Bernard is an Earth, Wind, and Fire fan. Like, that's how I knew of them. But my grandparents and my mom wasn't really in the Earth, Wind, and Fire. I love when my mother, when the Earth, Wind, and Fire come on, she'll be like, oh, yeah, that's your Uncle Bernard's era. And I'll be like, what? And she was like, that was just his era. I didn't really get into it. So again, my mom and my grandparents didn't play it when we would be around the house like that. But again, I knew all of their hits. Keep your head to the sky, shining star, top of the world. Not top of the world. That's the way.
That's the way of the world.
That's the
Of the
way of the
world.
world. Thank you. Get away, which is my favorite song.
Love it. Love
Mighty
it.
Mighty, Devotion, all of that. So I knew that. And I did a video maybe in 2016. I did a video on my top 7 bands of all time, right? And they're a part of it, but I've never listened to an album from them before. I knew all of the greatest hits, but I never listened to an album before, right? So I just knew everybody would talk about Maurice Starr and how much of a genius he was. Maurice Starr. Oh God, Maurice White. Come on, JR, get it together.
We knew what you were saying. Don't
Maurice
worry about it.
White.
We knew you'd find it eventually.
Yeah, so Maurice White, everybody would say how much of a genius he was. And then I knew he worked with the emotions and all that. But again, I never listened to an Earth, Wind, and Fire album. So finally, I was talking to our brother Sin, and he was like, yo, he was talking about Earth, Wind, and Fire because he loves Earth, Wind, and Fire. I think it's his favorite group. And he was like, yo, do you know this song and know this song? And then after a while, I was like, bro, I never listened to a Earth, Wind, and Fire album before. He said, excuse me, you did what? I was like, I never listened to a full Earth, Wind, and Fire album before. You are going to start with their catalog and you're going to start from the beginning and you're going to go all the way. And that was like maybe 4.5 years ago. And ever since then, I've lived with these albums for 4 years. And I said, what in the hell was I waiting for? Like, these albums are just music to me.
So I just don't really know a world where Earth, Wind, and Fire wasn't in the midst of it, especially with my family. Like everybody loved Earth, Wind, and Fire, so that was always a thing going on. My mom had the records, so what made me go to the records is all the interesting, weird covers, because that's how I got into one of my favorite bands, The New Birth, off the strength of the album covers. I was curious, like, ooh, this is weird. So I actually had listened to the albums just my whole life. But I could see how people wouldn't listen to the albums because the amount of hits and radio singles they had, you couldn't escape that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just so many. So, when you can say, well, I don't really know Earth, Wind& Fire, but you can name 10 songs. Just like JR did with me with Sade. And I
Oh
start
boy.
naming songs. I never letting that go, just so you know.
Oh
Um,
God.
and I start naming songs. Oh yeah, I know that one. I know, I love that one. I like, ooh. I was like, boy.